Afghanistan today is suffering under gender apartheid. The country is suffering under Taliban rule. There's a complete erasure or attempted erasure of women in society by the Taliban.
To the Taliban, a woman riding a bicycle is deemed impure and therefore her physical integrity is threatened.
They could be persecuted, they could be arrested, they could be tortured, they could be killed.
So we created a humanitarian chain to save these cyclist girls. It was a very secret operation. I was so anxious and scared that these girls will die because of us.
These young girls had no future. They were just told it's over. From one day to the next, they turned off all the lights. That's what happened when the Taliban took over. That's why we built, so to speak, an extraction network, allowing them to escape the hell they were in.
It's always been very difficult for women to ride bikes in Afghanistan. Our society won't accept it. That was already the case before the Taliban takeover.
When we started cycling, my sister and I, some people in our neighborhood complained to our parents. They asked them how could they let us do that.
Every time I'd leave home to go training, I'd get insulted, right up to the time I'd come back. We couldn't go out alone because of the risk of getting arrested. We ran the risk of being beaten up, hit, or kidnapped.
After the Taliban takeover, when they successfully took the city overnight, they crushed the dreams of all Afghani women.
When I started working in Afghanistan, my work was separate from cycling. I was working in women's prisons. I was working I was building a school for the deaf. I worked in remote schools in the mountains. I was traveling all over the country. And because I'm a mountain biker, I was really curious about this gender barrier. Why didn't I see girls on bikes? And I immediately started supporting the Afghan national cycling team. And they were willing to risk their lives and their family's honor to ride a bike. They believed that it was their right to ride just like their brothers. They were the bravest girls I've ever met. No one expected that the Taliban would walk into Kabul with no resistance, that they would just stroll in, and no one expected that Ashraf Ghani, the president of Afghanistan, would just flee. Both of those things, coupled with a completely disastrous plan, or I guess lack of plan by the US, meant that it was complete chaos.
One day our teachers showed up for class with fear in their eyes. They asked us to put our things away and go home because the Taliban had taken over Kabul.
I called my dad. He understood the situation. He knew we might be able to leave the country by going to the airport. The Americans and the Italians were helping those who wished to leave, those who didn't want to live under the Taliban regime. But my dad didn't know what was really happening at Kabul airport. He thought all we had to do was show our passports to get on a plane. He had no idea what was actually going on. We spent a week around the airport trying to reach it by any possible means. But it was impossible, no matter the time of day or night.
And with great difficulty, we managed to get close to the gate. But all of a sudden, there was a massive explosion. I had no idea what was going on. I could see the smoke all around me. There were people with around me with their skull cracked open. And right next to that, there was a stream where the water had turned red from the blood. Children who were barely 1 or 2 years old had been carried away. I was very scared.
When Kabul fell, women were being harmed, women were being hunted. Every single day, I was getting 50 messages from Afghans pleading for help. I had to do whatever I could to make sure that those that I had worked with would be safe.
I'm reasonably well known in the cycling world, as I own a professional cycling team that was in the world tour, and I got a call from an American journalist. She had a friend. This woman's name was Shannon Galpin. I was asked if I could help out, and the idea was to extract the Afghan female cycling team, the national team. So the cycling angle was critical to initiate the mission. But once I got involved in the mission, I got emotionally involved. And I agreed to make some calls. And I came across the CEO of Israel, CEO and founder of Israel, Yotam Politzer, that did humanitarian work in disaster zones when there's an earthquake or a hurricane, and they come, they extract people.
Sylvan Adams called me and he said that there is a cycling women group in Afghanistan that are desperate to flee and that their life is at risk simply because there are girls riding their bike. And immediately when he told me that, I said, okay, we have to find a way to help them and to get them out. And I said, listen, Sylvan, we've never been to Afghanistan. We don't know anyone there, but let's give it a shot.
And he said, but you know, this operation's going to cost money. And I replied, listen, Yotam, that's my role. I've got this covered. He says, yeah, but I haven't told you the cost. I said, it doesn't matter what it costs. We're gonna save these girls.
And a few days later, I found myself on a flight to the border of Afghanistan and Tajikistan. And what was really unclear to me is how I can actually assist, how I can actually help, because between Afghanistan and Israel, there is no diplomatic relations. So I knew that I personally cannot go in. I can be on the border. I can coordinate the extraction and the rescue operation, but I cannot go in. When we were in Tajikistan, in our team, we had a Tajiki woman with us, Anahita, and she was really helping us with translations and local coordination. So she was like our local fixer. And we also had a guy called Salam. He's also a humanitarian worker. And he was very important because he had some good contacts within Afghanistan. And that's when we started this operation.
All of the borders in Afghanistan were closed through air, through land. All of the embassies were closed. Everyone in Afghanistan was locked in.
The Taliban had checkpoints on the road, and they were not letting anyone out. And we know that anyone who will be taken by the Taliban could be killed or put in prison.
So we started working on what the skeleton of an evacuation would look like and what we needed to do to get people across a closed border and which one it needed to be, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. And Yotam had connections in Tajikistan that he thought we could apply pressure to open that border.
Very quickly in this operation, as the person who was leading the humanitarian part, I realized that I really need partners to help me on the diplomatic side. I need partners who have political power, who can convince countries to open their borders, to accept these girls, to find visas for them.
At the time of the evacuation efforts in Afghanistan, I was president of the International Cycling Union. In 2021, we witnessed the fall of the provinces one by one at the hands of the Taliban. So we started to draw up a list of people likely to get evacuated. That's when I received a phone call from Sylvan Adams. He said, David, I know you're working on evacuating Afghani nationals. We're doing the same on our end. But what's proven difficult for us is getting them visas. We can't find any. It's super complicated. Their advantage was having operatives on site, but they needed help with the diplomatic part that I could offer, as I had direct access to the Chancellery here in Switzerland through Philippe Luba and Guy Parmelin, the president of the Confederation. So that was basically the role I played during this entire period.
Qui a été le mien pendant cette période.
I embarked on this extraordinary human adventure thanks to my ties to David Lappartient, the president of the UCI. He called saying, I need visas, and I'm counting on you to deliver them. I didn't get paid for it. It was totally outside my mandate as a Vaud politician. Completely. It might be one of the things I'm most proud of. I went on to call 3 federal councillors on their private numbers. I also called Mrs. Kalasata, who told me how complicated the situation was in Afghanistan. She just had a meeting with her German counterpart, who had given asylum to a few Afghan nationals, including 2 terrorists. Obviously, at that point, Germany wasn't sure how to handle them. Nevertheless, she said, "Go ahead if you want." I asked her to arrange a meeting with her Secretary of State in charge of immigration. I spoke to him on the phone the next day. I told him I'd send a list of people we needed to extract as put together by the UCI, and that I needed special passes. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to find a country who would agree to temporarily welcome Afghans unless they had a final destination.
They created a group on WhatsApp. The president of the federation told us, "Girls, don't put your lives in danger. The UCI will help us leave the country. Stay patiently at home while we find a solution."
The plan that we came up with was to evacuate people by land from the Tajikistan border. So we told all the girls to wait in Kabul in their hiding place.
We talked with Yotam, and we got the plan that there would be a meeting point in Kabul. So we needed places that were large enough to be discreet. If a group of girls shows up, that it's discreet, but then not so large that you can't figure out where that meeting place is.
Throughout the process of fleeing Afghanistan, which lasted about a month, we would get messages in our WhatsApp group encouraging us to remain hopeful. These messages were telling us to keep our hijab and clothes ready for the day we'd leave Afghanistan. We had to have suitable clothing and a small bag, for example, to bring only the bare necessities.
We couldn't take 40 million people out of Afghanistan. That was clear. We couldn't do that. So we had a challenge to put together a list of cyclists that we wished to extract. Everyone agreed that Shannon and David, who each had their own lists, would work together and prepare a common list so that we would know who and how many people that we were expected to bring out.
The evacuation was going forward. I messaged Yotam. He sent a copy of, well, this is the evacuation list. There was only one name that I knew. There was nobody, my list was not on there. The replacement for the cyclists were co-workers and friends or colleagues of President Fazli. While his immediate family has every right to be evacuated, no one would contest that. You're the head of the Afghan Cycling Federation. You and your family would get evacuated. The men who are the staff of the Federation do not have priority over the women athletes. Absolutely not. That's insane. And so I said that to Yotam. I said, "Are you sure did you send me the right list? This isn't my list that I submitted, because this is the list that we're going with. And the people who gave me this list are the ones who are able to get permission from Tajikistan. So that's what matters." So they were running their evacuation, and what had worked really great as the original, collaboration was just gone, erased, but no explanation.
I said to Sylvan Adams that we had a real problem, and we chose to go ahead with the evacuation plan without Shannon Galpin. because we were focused on a specific goal, which was to evacuate these individuals and not just those that she wanted to help.
Les personnes que elle forcément nécessairement voulait.
When I checked for new messages, I saw that our team lead had asked the girls who had a passport to send it to him. He had also published a list of names of those who would be able to leave Afghanistan.
Unfortunately, my sister's name wasn't on that list. So I wrote in the WhatsApp group chat that my sister was training with me, and I asked why her name wasn't on that list, as her life was also in danger. They replied by saying not to worry, that a second group would be put together, and my sister's name would be on that other list.
Finally, one night, they gave us an address in Kabul. We were all to meet there, to leave Afghanistan.
My dad had a car. We went to pick up several girls from the cycling team, and we all left together. I was afraid they would arrest us because I had my ID and all my cycling documents on me. When we arrived at the meeting place, a man was holding a list in his hand, and he asked us our names to make sure they were on it. He asked for my first name. I said Nazanin.
There were several cyclists, but other people as well. It came to us as a shock to see that some of them had come with their families. Thousands of questions started running through our heads. How come these people had brought their families, whereas we were on our own? I begged the man in charge to add my sister's name so she could leave with me. But he refused.
We discreetly exited the building, heading towards the big buses that were parked on the side of the road. Even inside the buses, the lights were off. We were sitting there, stressed out, not knowing where we were going. The man in charge knew, though. The driver started the bus, and we went on our way. I asked the girls seated next to me to check Google Maps to try to see where they were taking us. She was older and much more experienced than me. She checked and said, "We're either going to Mazar-e-Sharif or Kunduz. Let's follow on Google Maps and see where this bus is really going."
Back then, when we left, I was 16 years old, and I didn't understand much. I didn't get to say goodbye to my family the way I would have wanted because I wasn't sure we'd be able to actually leave Afghanistan. When I tried to get some sleep, my feelings shifted. I was overwhelmed with emotion, and I cried. It was the first time I was finding myself in that situation, far away from my family.
We found out during that operation that some of them didn't have passports because they never left Afghanistan. 41 of the girls never left Afghanistan. So we said, how can we print passports for them? We don't have a passport machine.
How do you get passports when the regime has fallen and the country is in chaos and the Taliban has taken over? How does one get passports for these people who want to transit out of their country? And we were lucky. We found a friendly person who worked for the former regime in Russia, in Moscow.
Ambassador Jawad, he was no longer the Afghan ambassador because he's not part of the Taliban. He's part of the old government. But I was connected to him, and he told me he was really moved by our effort. And he said, I can print you passports, because he was still in Moscow and he had extra passports. So we got all the details of these girls on WhatsApp and Signals, and we filled out the form for them, and we sent it all by WhatsApp to the Afghan embassy in Moscow. They printed these passports overnight. They worked 24 hours with no stop. They sent it in a diplomatic mail. And I remember we got this box, and I open it and I see 41 Afghan passports. I think if someone from the Interpol would see me there, he would put me in prison for life, smuggling Afghan passports. Nazanin.
People's lives.
On the road, the bus was stopped by the Taliban. They carried out checks and asked where we were off to altogether. Everyone was confused and didn't know what to say. Then the driver told the Taliban we were going to a wedding, all as girls together. I don't understand why the Taliban freak out when they see girls, since we're the ones who fear them. In the end, the Taliban said, it's okay, you can go.
When they got to the border, the Taliban literally had their guns trained at the girls, and they were told there is no walking to Tajikistan because the border was blocked by the Tajiks. They didn't want a flood of refugees coming into their country.
Yotam Polizer was waiting in Tajikistan, ready to welcome the girls. And I received a call asking me, what do we do now? We had 125 people in buses in the middle of nowhere. Now what? We were running out of ideas.
It was a very dangerous situation, and we realized very quickly that they cannot stay there. So we needed to find a safe house for them, and we told all the girls to wait there while we are trying to solve the situation.
It was a one-story house with a yard. All the passengers from the buses went inside. A few hours later, we heard knocking on the door. It was the Taliban.
We were panicking and terrified. We didn't know what to do. We couldn't get out because of the Taliban.
They asked why there were so many people inside that house and what we were doing here. Then the Taliban dragged 3 or 4 men away. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but they were interrogated and tortured.
When the men came back, they started whispering, and I thought to myself that I shouldn't have come. At that point, everybody kept quiet. Everyone was in a panic.
The Taliban ordered the men to leave the premises, to return to Kabul, and to take the women with them.
Honestly, at this time, I thought we should just give up. We did our best. It's an impossible mission, and we should let go. But then, I thought that if they stay in Afghanistan, really their life is at risk. Not just because the situation was bad, but because the Taliban already took their names, and they knew exactly who was there on this list and who was there in the safe house. So we really realized that we cannot leave these girls behind. We have to find a way to let them out. We told the girls to tell the Taliban that they are going back to Kabul. And they went to the middle of the city to the bus station, and it looked like they were waiting for the bus to Kabul. At the same time, we arranged the other bus to take them to the other side of Afghanistan, the opposite side from Kabul, to Mazar-e-Sharif.
The buses left as if they were going back to Kabul. We were getting further away from Kunduz. The driver thought the Taliban would follow us to make sure we were indeed returning to Kabul. And suddenly, I realized we'd changed direction and were heading towards Mazar-e-Sharif.
We changed tactics, and we were able to find an airplane that was willing to fly into Mazar-e-Sharif, take our group, and fly them to Tajikistan.
Chartering a plane and having it land in a country at war, at the hands of the Taliban no less, who fire missiles at anything that moves, was quite the delicate operation. Finally, David managed to charter a Belarusian plane and had it land in Mazar-e-Sharif.
But we had a problem. We needed the passports.
Yeah, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 passports.
Put in group of 10, take these 9. We went to the border between Tajikistan and Afghanistan to hand over these passports.
And there was one brave soul from the group who volunteered to travel across the country and retrieve those passports and hopefully return on time, because we had a charter flight. We had chartered an aircraft to take them out.
Our agreement gave us until noon the next day to take off, and this was at night. But it's a 4-hour drive to the border, and there's a curfew prohibiting driving at night. I said, you'll have to drive with the lights off and be there by 6 a.m. Figure out a way to make it work. There's a little cash in the boot. You need to find a solution.
Il faudra trouver une solution.
I remember a small car came to the border to pick up these passports. And we thought, that's it. The girls will get the passports. And we are texting, and we don't hear back from the girls. And then we found out that Taliban arrested this person who was trying to give the passport.
The Taliban officer said, what are you doing with all of these passports? And he said, well, these are members of my family. He made up a story. And He was grilled by this officer, but he gave the right answers and was given the passports, made it back just in the nick of time to Mazar-e Sharif before the flight was taking off.
Everything was ready. They had their passports. The plane was ready, but on the final check, when they needed to board the plane, the Taliban immigration officer, he looked at the passports and he said, "This is fake passports. This was not made by the Taliban. This all made in Russia, and you are all going to jail."
We started to panic and to wonder what would happen to us. If they found out we were cyclists, it was over for us. We'd go to jail.
And we called the airline company and we talked to the Taliban, and eventually they had to pay some money, and that's how these girls were released. So even though the Taliban knew that these passports were fake, they let them go.
During the flight, on the plane, going to Tajikistan, we were happy to have finally been able to leave Afghanistan.
In hindsight, it was completely unreasonable. We took insane risks. If the chartered plane had blown up in midair, everyone would have accused us of being reckless. You're neither the Red Cross, nor the army, nor a state authority, and you charter a plane without proper air traffic control in a country at war. And they would have been right. Completely right. But life isn't always about doing the reasonable and sensible thing. Sometimes you have to try things differently. It either works or it doesn't. And this time, it worked.
When I arrived in Tajikistan, I was still afraid. But I could feel I wasn't in danger anymore, like I was in Kunduz or Mazar-e Sharif, and I'd made it out of Afghanistan.
40 minutes later, they landed in Tajikistan, and we were there waiting for them. No problem. But unfortunately, that was not the end of the journey, and they were stuck in the airport, and it took us 3 days to find another country that can take them, and that country was Albania.
The UCI found some sort of summer camp located 50 kilometers from Tirana where they were left stranded, so to speak, up until the time I made it out there.
1 week after our arrival in Albania, Philippe Lebin came with someone who worked for the UCI. He told us that the girls would be divided into 2 groups. One group would go to Canada and the other to Switzerland.
When they were at customs before boarding, one of the officers refused to let the Afghan girls through for not having a visa. Tempers flared. He called in his superior, an Albanian customs major. He told me no one would go through without a proper visa. Naively, I took out my business card, saying I was a state councillor. He couldn't have cared less. But 2 days before that customs check, the Albanian president invited me over. We spoke about many things, but very little about cycling. And during that meeting, he suggested taking a few photos of us shaking hands, you know, formal diplomatic photos. So I had the idea of showing him the photo that had been taken inside the president's office of me shaking his hand. I said to him, "Do you know that man?" Straight away, his face went pale. He changed drastically. He grabbed his phone and made a call to his superior. And as he put the phone down, he says, "Please understand, I was only doing my job." To which I said, "No problem," and we were able to go.
For me today, it would be impossible to live in Afghanistan. I would 100% go on this journey all over again.
I grew up in an educated family, open to the world. Even though we lived in a small Afghan town, my parents' first priority was their children's education. These are the reasons that drove me to join the national team and to train to this day. Cycling saved my life and brought me to Switzerland. All of this is thanks to my bicycle.
Currently, my sister is in Afghanistan. Here, I can feel what it means to be a human being and to be a woman. Justice, freedom, equality, it's all right here.